All right, people, we back. Victory and Vices podcast. Me, Rory Spooner, James Beck, and Reese Henley. And we got all the talk of the town. Okay, so project big picture. We're going to get straight into it. It's the big news that's come out of football. And it's something that we've been discussing, well, pretty much all day, actually, in the group chat. It's a huge shake-up, and they've called it probably the biggest shake-up in Premier League football history. So Becky's going to start by unpacking some of it. Me and Reese will obviously give our opinions on it as well. In the comments below whilst we're here, don't forget, obviously, let us know your opinion on it too. But yeah, straight into it, Becky. Project big picture. So it's drawn a pretty mixed response thus far. Elaborate on it further for us initially.
Yeah, so we've all done a bit of reading on it, but in a nutshell, it all started back in 2017. The Fenway Sports Group with Liverpool put this kind of proposition together and outlined these sort of guidelines that we'll go over in a second. And it's more recently been backed by Manchester United, and then obviously been put forward now as Project Big Picture. Now, there's a lot of changes that they're proposing. And as you said, Spooner, it would probably result in, if this was to go ahead, which is a big if at the moment, it would be the biggest shake-up since the inception of the Premier League. Now, what they're essentially trying to do is sort of shift where the power in the decision-making tends to lie. Because at the moment, it's a one club, one vote system rule. So every club in the Premier League gets a vote, and you only need 14 out of 20 of those clubs to agree on something for that to be fully agreed on. They're looking to abolish that entirely, and there's going to be 9 clubs that would hold the voting power on pretty much anything. And they're the big 6: United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City and Spurs, plus the 3 longest standing Premier League clubs on top of that, which are Southampton, Everton and West Ham. I just realized
Southampton's also in that mix as well, I think, apparently.
And only if this, so let's fast forward, if this was to be passed and this would be the new system that we're going to work on, only 6 out of those 9 clubs, for example, would need to agree on something for it to be agreed on. So that would be things like if a big club, say Newcastle, for example, the takeover, that would mean that it wouldn't be the Premier League's decision. It would be if 6 out of those 9 clubs agree on that big, that takeover happening, that would be the case. It would be accepted. What they're also looking to do is change the league from 20 teams to 18, which would mean that the top 2 championship teams would be promoted. 3rd, 4th and 5th place in the championship would go into a playoff with 16th place in the Premier League. We're also looking to remove the League Cup and the Community Shield. So we're talking about a lot of big changes here, which people are probably raising their eyebrows at reading them. But what they're looking to do, going in the other direction, and what they're trying to sell it on, and there's a reason why the EFL chairman, Rick Parry, is behind this and the Premier League not so much. So what they're going to be doing for all of this is giving £250 million as an upfront payment to the rest of the Football League, the remainder of the teams in the Football League. And then they're going to be giving £100 million upfront to the FA. Now, they're selling it as sort of, there's a lot of clubs that are struggling financially because of COVID, clubs that are going into administration. And they're basically saying that if they don't act, then it's going to result in the teams at the bottom end of the pyramid and possibly further up having financial difficulties. They're also proposing that at the moment, 4% of the Premier League revenue goes to EFL clubs. They want to up that to 25%. So obviously they get a much bigger slice of the pie that's filtered right down through the pyramid. So there's other things as well, such as they're to do with how they're going to roll out that each club will be able to sell games to their fans outside the UK. They're going to try and cap away tickets in the Premier League at £20 and other little details, which obviously we can talk about in more depth another time. But those are the main things. Now, like you say, Spoon, I'll open up to you guys. It's very split at the moment, and it tends to be the EFL fans of clubs and owners who tend to be more towards this and for it than Premier League clubs. And I seen Reece shaking his head a little bit in the beginning as a Newcastle fan, obviously, his club wouldn't be involved in any of the voting systems should this be the case. So, yeah, it's very. There's a lot of people that are like, "Whoa, you're going to ruin everything," and then there's a lot of people in the lower scales and I'm like, "Well, this is what we need." So I open it to you guys.
Get stuck into it, Reese. Get stuck into it.
Look, 2 words, lads. Alarm bells. Straight away. There's so many things about this that are extremely concerning. But let me touch on something, an analogy for you guys. In the 1970s, I think almost 100% or even 100% of the UK judges, the highest level that you can be in the legal system, were old white men from conservative, middle class or upper class backgrounds. If we were to say all of these men are the final decision makers on anything about appointing new judges or anything like that, then what you would say is that's wrong, because that's just going to promote an elitist, classist system. Okay? Now, you can apply that analogy in so many aspects of this new proposal, and that's all it is at this stage, thankfully. The main selling points, like you said, I mean, I think it is a huge plus that in the system, the EFL clubs would be getting a lot of money. We've seen so many times that the EFL clubs are being neglected, especially during COVID, and they need help. And so it is nice to see that even 3 years ago, clubs like Liverpool, like Manchester United, have been trying to think about how they can help in that sense. And I think with regards to the away ticket price cuts, that's obviously good for fans as well, because nobody wants to be paying through the nose. I think we've said so many times, and you'll probably hammer the point home, it is a game created by the people for the people, and that is where it needs to stay. So yeah, definitely the price capping on the tickets is good as well. And from a personal point of view, people might disagree with me, but from a personal point of view, I think the idea of a relegation playoff where the 16th place would play the third place in the championship and they'd play off, like we've seen in other leagues, I think that proposition of it is quite exciting. However, that's an extremely shallow proposition, I think, from these clubs, because I think I did initially give you that analogy just now about the judges and say that alarm bells are ringing. The fact that, I mean, straight off the bat, it's very transparent. You see that the fact that they get greater prize money, that more of the pot gets split between the big teams. And if I was sitting here making rules for my office, I'd say, if I'm in charge of all the rules, give Reese the most money then, And that's what these sides are saying. They're saying, okay, well, we're in charge, we'll have the most money as long as we're going to be finishing in the top half. It basically ensures that the biggest clubs who rely on the biggest income are basically guaranteed the most income, and therefore the following year to finish in the top 6, and the cycle continues. Then you come to the next point, which is that they'll be in charge of basically everything, which is horrendous, because obviously as those top 6 clubs, yes, they're saying, okay, there's 3 more teams that can be involved here, but we only need the top 6 to agree to anything. So let's say, yes, a Newcastle, for example, but I mean, we know there was human rights issues and things with that takeover, but let's just say a Sheffield United get a backer from perfectly ethical country, anywhere. Let's say there's an absolute billionaire in France. They strike oil, and some guy gets all the money, and he said, okay, I want to go over to Sheffield and I want to invest in them no end, legally, all above board, complying by all the FIFA regulations, and everything checks out. They wouldn't have a leg to stand on for the Premier League. They'd have to allow the takeover, and Sheffield United in this scenario would become one of the biggest clubs in world football. In this scenario, the top 6 can go, well, actually, we don't want to drop out of the top 6. Let's get rid of that takeover, but that's not happening. And they would have the power to do that. It would be nepotistic, and they would be able to just create this barrier of top 6 that's very difficult to penetrate. They also want to split off the Women's Football League, which would basically nullify much income that they get and all the progress that they're making in the women's game. So it's back, it's bad for them. One other thing we've seen in the last few years is the big clubs saying, putting all their kids out in the EFL Cup. And they're saying now that they want to scrap it because they don't like it, because it's just a youth system for them to get their kids in. But for the clubs in either maybe in the Premier League or for the clubs lower down the pyramid, it's a massive opportunity to win silverware. It's another revenue income stream for tickets being sold and things like that for the games. So that's another thing that they're not taking into account. It's pushing their own agenda and not the agenda of most of the EFL clubs. They're saying that pay-per-view now will become a major thing for fans, which will be abused, as we've seen. 19 of the 20 clubs recently voted to have fans pay to watch their own clubs, which they were going to get for their own subscriptions anyway, which is poor, really. And they obviously want to bias all these fixtures and pile-ups and things to the England national team and not the Scotland national team, not the Welsh national team or any other national team. It's all biased towards the English national team. So let me pitch a hypothetical scenario. Let's say that 6 of the 9 clubs, which is what would be required for any major shake up to the system or the format. Let's say those 6 clubs go, right, we're going to give a head start on points to the top 6 clubs every year. We'll give them all a 10-point head start on the rest of the league. Everyone said that's ridiculous. You can't do that, but they can do it. They'll have the power to do it. They can do literally anything they want. And because of that, they would stay in the top 6 every year because no one would catch up a 10-point head start. Of course, it's a little extreme, but they would have the power to do these things. And another hypothetical scenario, what if they said that salary caps would only apply to clubs with a less than 40,000 seating stadium capacity, which is, again, coincidentally, less than 6 of the 9 clubs. So it would, again, promote that sort of classist, nepotistic agenda. And then once we get into that new system and it all gets put through, they could just say, okay, well, remember those 3 good points we made about the EFL clubs' money, the away ticket prices, the relegation playoff? Yeah, we don't want to do those. We just want to do these things. And 6 of the 9 clubs are going to vote to actually do the things that I've pointed out are concerning, and we're going to leave out the good parts that actually make more sense, like giving all the money to the EFL. We're not going to do that. We'll just split it between the top 6, or we'll split it between the Premier League, and we'll rake in more and more TV money. I think Boris Johnson's come out and said he's not in favour of it. I'm not in favour of it. It ruins the integrity of the competition. And I actually think that sanctions should be imposed against Manchester United and Liverpool for even coming up with something like this. It's like, I think I read the term, it's like turkeys voting for Christmas, in that the 14 other Premier League clubs that just won't back it. And I can't see it happening, and I don't think many experts can either on. It would be like saying, all the progress the black and minority ethnic groups, committees and the PFA have done for player welfare and all that kind of stuff, all to go back to a nepotistic system where you only get picked depending on if you're affiliated with a top club. And there's no way in for people who are at lesser clubs. It just stinks.
Yeah.
I think Reece has mentioned a few really good points there. And what I would say is that the proposal here, they're trying to be clever in the sense that they're trying to dangle a carrot in front of the EFL by presenting them with potentially lucrative financial sort of bonuses coming towards them and them clubs that are in need, and that's obviously caught their attention. But I think you ultimately, like Reece has kind of said, is question the motive, if anything, of what they're really trying to do here, because they're trying to push home how much this will benefit the EFL. But I think there are other things at play here, other things that that they're trying to gain in the long term, and sort of power that they're trying to get from this. And I know Reece give a few extreme examples, and I'm sure they probably, if this was to happen, they wouldn't quite be as extreme as that, I'd like to think. And you'd like to think that there was another governing body who would have to sort of at least review it, and it'd have to be criteria and blah, 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 and things like that. But I believe they need 14 Premier League clubs to back this, which I don't think they'll get, for the record. I can't see it happening because what they're doing essentially is relinquishing any kind of power that they have at the moment, which I can't see happening. But you look at the clubs like United and Liverpool, they mentioned that as part of this, they would be allowed to offer 8 games a season to fans outside the UK and charge them for that. And then there was a point of, seasons after that, what's to stop them upping that to 16 games a season, and then 24 games, and then 38 games. And you've got clubs like Manchester United that they claim they've got over 1 billion fans worldwide. And it seems quite clear that clubs like United and Liverpool are obviously trying to tap into that market and trying to pretty much monetize towards their fans outside the UK. So I believe they're trying to pull the wool over other clubs' eyes and the EFL's eyes, so to speak. I don't think it's going to work. They've cleverly tried to say this is what you'll get in terms of financial gain, but ultimately I would be very shocked if this was to be agreed by 14 plus Premier League clubs. Very, very shocked.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. It's probably one of the most interesting things we've ever discussed on this podcast. I think the whole proposal is, how can I describe it? It sounds like a power grab. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like a power grab. And I'm just reading here some of the headlines. They've called it, as you said, Becky, it's a cynical act of misdirection, a hostile takeover spun as a rescue package. But then there's other people that are kind of looking at it from a different angle and thinking, oh, well, the EFL clubs, it looks like a power grab, lads. I won't lie to you. And to be honest with you, we had a whole podcast, me and Becky, the other day, talking about how shit Manchester United are at business. I don't think Ed Woodward should be making any of those big decisions for Manchester United and the rest of the Premier League. I really don't. It is very elitist, like we said. I mean, I'm just looking at it here now, and the fact that it's so top heavy and it's so stacked. The deck is stacked. They can't lose. Like we said, any sort of big decision, small decision, they've just got to have a little powwow with each other and be like, look, you vote for me, I'll vote for you. You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. Oh, by the way, we need this done. Oh, okay, but we need this done. It's almost like politics. That's what it's like. It's like the House of Commons. It's like, in America, where it's Republican and Conservative, as a Republican and Democrat, they're always looking for ways to outdo each other and get one over on each other. And it's all a bit slimy. And I don't like it. Now, there are aspects of it that I think is very good. For example, I've never been a massive fan of the Charity Shield, or whatever the hell you want to call it in this day and age, Community Shield. I'd happily see that go. The League Cup, I would happily not see any Premier League clubs in that. Give it to the league teams. Say, here's a chance to make a bit of history. League One, League Two, the Championship, you all compete against each other. And let's see what you can do. And here's a chance for you to win a major trophy. I have no problem with that. Now, whether they'd want to add those extra games to their scheduling, which is already relatively tight, that remains to be seen. But yeah, ticket prices, again, I like that. But I think that's sort of, it's like you said, Becky, it's almost pulling the wool over people's eyes. It's like give with one hand and take with the other. And yeah, I mean, the deck is stacked and it seems very, very slimy. And I'm kind of with Reece on this one. I don't know if you could impose sanctions against the clubs that are bringing it to the table, but I certainly think you could publicly shame them, because what they're doing is not for the benefit. It's not for the benefit of everybody, no matter which way they dress it up. You could give the 250 million to the EFL now, and then go, by the way, well, that's it now. What else do you want? We're not giving you anything else. We give you 250 million. So I'm with you, lads. I'm not a fan.
What I was going to say is, I mean, yeah, absolutely agree with you. I mean, we sound like we're all on the same page here, essentially, but there's so many things that could go wrong with this. I mean, it stinks to me that, and if it was to be this way, then obviously I think it's bad PR, given how the cards have fallen here. But let's say that, that 3 years ago, people have come together and they just said, do you know what? They're not doing anything for the EFL. And I'm trying to sit here and say that there are selfless motivations here. Okay, if it goes through, then obviously it's going to benefit the clubs. Everyone knows that. But what it does, I guess, it puts pressure on the Premier League to support the EFL more than they are doing at the moment, just showing that with the bigger clubs, the bigger parties at the table, sort of thing, are discontent with it, which is a good thing. But I mean, like you said, yeah, away ticket, every single plus you can turn into a negative. Away ticket price caps, great. But then the big six can set that, and they can say the price caps for 400 quid a ticket. And that doesn't help at all, And also, a concerning thing would be, yes, positive into a negative. EFL clubs would get loads and loads of money. Great. They'd get a 250 million pound package. it blasts through that in a couple of years. All of a sudden, they need more money. And they will need a continuous revenue stream from the Premier League and these big 6 clubs. At which point they get to say, "Okay, that's fine. We'll give you another package. Of course, you'll get some of this income and stuff, and you'll continue to get it." But we wanted to take 6 of our young players every year, and we wanted them to play 30 games in your championship season, but only the top 6 clubs, or only this top 9 clubs, whatever the decision makers are at the table. And all of a sudden, envelopes start to be passed around, and like you said, Spooner, like people will go behind people's back, secure other people's vote, bribery will start, and it honestly is a bad thing.
Yeah, slippery slope, lads. I agree. Lads, it's very rare we're actually all on the same page with anything, to be honest with you. This might be a first, but I don't know. It just feels very.
I think it's a
very shallow proposal.
It's fair to say that there's a lot of details and finer details that nobody knows at the moment, and how things would pan out if this was to progress. And we've all agreed in thinking that we don't think it will progress. We've talked about these hypothetical situations of things that the big 6 or big 9, I guess, could do. And I think that's perhaps a conversation for another day, should this progress, and then we can really sort of unpack where they could go with it. But I don't think it's going to get to that stage. But it really does feel like one extreme to the other, in the sense that the EFL have been calling for a lot of financial help from the Premier League. And there's one thing getting financial help. We mentioned it, they get a 4% of the Premier League revenue. And they were perhaps thinking, could we not just up that percentage a little bit? You just filter a little bit more down, and all of a sudden we're finding ourselves looking at Sky Sports News one morning, and this proposal's been put forward. It's gone from all over years. So I definitely agree that the Premier League, of course, they can do more. They can always do a little bit more and filter a bit more down. But this proposal is quite absurd, and we are Spooner fans of one of the clubs that would benefit in that way from it, and we don't even agree with it. So.
I to be honest with you, this is a massive statement I'm going to throw out there. Look, I'm a Manchester United fan, but if that proposal ever came through, I'd be very tempted to not watch Manchester United again. That's the God's honest truth, because it is you've got morally corrupt people selling you a dream, and they're literally giving with one hand and taking with the other. Like, the moral aspects of some of these things are quite easy to implement. If you have men with a moral compass and a bit of courage and a bit of just substance, for example, subsidized Premier League away travel. Why the fuck can't you give that now? Do you know what I mean? What's wrong with giving that now? Knowing that we're coming out to the back end of a pandemic and football fans up and down the country are struggling. For some people, right? Again, the podcast is called Victory and Vices. For a lot of people, their football is their victory and their vice. It's the one thing getting them through the actual pandemic. Give them a helping hand, subsidize the away sections, put the cap on away tickets. Stop trying to charge £15 for us to watch a game. It's fucking ridiculous, lads. And we're all in agreement with it. And it's all stupid. And it'll get to a stage where it'll push a lot of people away from football, but potentially myself included. I'd go away, right, and I'd watch something that is, I want to say, morally superior, but there's aspects, I suppose, of all levels of football where that type of greed exists. But I wouldn't be paying to watch that.
Yeah, of course, and of course you could sit here and you could come up with hypothetical scenarios all night about any number of things, and this included, and if we just sit here and talk hypotheticals, what's to stop over the course of a few years' time, little by little win after little win for the top 6 clubs, it becomes an impenetrable system to impose anything against the top 6, and then we're in this system which is just completely irreversible. But what would concern me is, let's say that we're voting, there's a key vote coming up, and Tottenham need to win to get into the Champions League. Of course, I'm not accusing any club of being any particular way. I'm just saying what could happen. And they need to win a crucial game against Liverpool, who are top of the league. They've already won the league, and there's nothing on it for them. And so Tottenham say, okay, well, we could vote in favour of what you want, if you just, put a few reserves up against us. And very quickly, you're into the zone of match fixing. And what do we know are the consequences for match fixing is that, well, the governing bodies end up relegating you to huge sanctions, except for the fact that those governing bodies, those people making those decisions, are the people who are doing the match fixing. So you're very quickly into a position where you're in a lawless society.
Yeah, I agree. It's the wild, wild west of football. Fans, let us know your opinion on it. Are you for it? Are you against it? I'd love to get some fans' views from, the Championship and League One and League Two, and how you feel about it all. But yeah, let us know your opinions on it. I'm sure we will revisit it.
Going support as well in your comments, so we know where you are.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. Going from one ridiculous situation to another, coronavirus is still ongoing. It doesn't look like it may ever decide to leave. Yes, Cristiano Ronaldo today was announced as having a positive COVID test. We wish him well. I'm sure he'll be fine. He's a healthy young man, very low risk, as are other names that we can throw out there. Laporte, Thiago, Mendy, Pogba, Matuidi, Dybala, David Silva. That's just to name a few. So, moving forward, I was having a little look at this today, and I was thinking, there's a lot of Premier League footballers that are testing positive. There's a lot. And we talk about fan welfare, and player welfare is, it's very important as well. It's important. We discussed it all, with DKM when he was on a while back. And I'm thinking to myself, God, that's really weird how all these players are getting coronavirus. Surely they'd be a lot more protected. So I went away and I was having a quick look, because for those of you who are basketball fans, the NBA season is, I don't know if it's necessarily come to a close or it's come to a finish, but the Lakers have won the title, and they've all been in the bubble for the past couple of months. So just reading this about the NBA, it says, of the 344 players tested for COVID-19 on the NBA campus since test results were last announced on July 20th, 0 have returned positive tests. So when you look at player welfare, now, I understand, right, they're all in a bubble in Disney World. So it's a lot easier to maintain. They've sacrificed a lot. They've gone off, away from their families and their friends. They're all living in, all right, it's a bubble, but it's a high-class bubble, right? It's not necessarily maybe the most fun at times, but, they're not missing any meals. But they're very well looked after. And when I compare the treatment of them to football players, I'm thinking, why are we playing international friendlies on a Saturday? Wales B against England C. For what? What have we got to gain? And I just wanted your opinion, lads. Are we doing enough? I say we. Are the footballing bodies doing enough for player welfare right now?
Well, there's so many ways to look at that question. Ronaldo getting coronavirus could be either directly linked to the treatment of players, or it could just be as a complete coincidence because his government are, like ours, I assume Italy doing the same. A government is saying eat out to help out, so perhaps a waiter is giving him coronavirus. So we just don't know whether it's going to be linked to his situation. We can only assume it is, but or whether it isn't. So talking about player welfare, I guess we've talked to Matt Smith, in the past. I think he would be one of the people to be able to comment on that. As a player in the game who's experiencing it, and it sounded like when we interviewed him, at least a few months ago, everything was being done the right way. Whether that's changed at all, I'm not sure, but one thing that concerns me is you look at those three players now who breached lockdown restrictions. Ben Chilwell, Tammy Abraham, I can't remember the other.
Jadon Sancho.
Jadon Sancho, sorry, the three that did it, and then I think Ben Chilwell ended up being in the England squad or withdrew or something. But these players are not really getting any big sanctions, are they? If you're a footballer of that kind and you're earning the money that you are, it's not hard for you to just abide by the rules for you to do your job. If I was calling to the office tomorrow and they said, okay, well, you can come in, we'll pay you your wage and things, but all we need you to do is not go to any raves, illegal raves. And I go, yeah, okay. And if I went, then surely they should just say, okay, well, they'd be well within their rights to say, okay, well, don't come into work anymore. You're endangering not only the people who work here, but the cleaners, everyone else that's involved with the business. And that's no different with football. Think what's the age of the average tea lady or dinner lady in a football club?
Yeah, you're right.
It's not just the footballers that are at risk. If Cristiano Ronaldo tests positives, then, there could be a 90-year-old woman who's been working at the club for 70 years, working at Juventus, dishing out, ham, egg and chips every day. And all it takes is for one footballer who's 18 and earning far too much money to go to an illegal party, come in, give a COVID, and that's game over after 10 years working. Again, an extreme example, but why are there not harsher restrictions?
I mean, firstly, what I will say, Reece, is that I'm not sure there's too many people eating ham, egg and chips in Turin. To start us off, I'm sure they'd be having some...
Brits abroad are definitely eating ham, egg and chips in Turin.
Aaron Ramsey is, for sure.
Yeah.
Or pizza dish. But I kind of agree with a lot of what Reece is saying. We don't know how well or perhaps not well the conditions are for footballers and how they're being tested and the rules that they're being asked to follow or not follow. How harsh are the clubs coming down on them? Like you say, Reece, we aren't really hearing of them having any significant sanctions or fines or anything happening to them. So you have to sort of call into question how hard are the clubs and countries really pushing this to them, because it just seems time after time and case after case we're hearing in the news of how I can't even think of the number now. Rishi reeled a lot of them off in a few episodes back. The amount of England players who have not abided by the basic COVID rules that have been set out. It seems so simple, but so many of them keep breaking the rules. So, and then we wonder why so many of these Premier League players are returning positive tests. And again, Reece pointed out, there can be coincidences. People do have to leave the house at time. They have to go for food. They do have to go to the supermarket, and the list goes on. But there just seems to be a little bit of a disregard, and we can't tar all the footballers with the same brush, of course, but there just seems to be more of a general disregard amongst football players to the rules, and it's certainly not helping the issue at the moment, isn't it? And Reece mentioned that a couple of his examples are extreme, but are they really extreme? Because the rate of this virus doesn't seem to be going anywhere fast, and if anything, they're going in the wrong direction. So you mentioned the NBA, 0 positive tests. Yes, they're in their own bubble, but perhaps that's something that the Premier League as a governing body or an organisation needs to look at, because they certainly need to tighten it up. Because you look at Liverpool, Mane had it, Thiago had it, and there was reports of a few other players having it as well. And it only takes one big issue of someone not following the rules, and the next thing the whole team could have it, and then you look at the kitman could have it, and we listed all the people in the club that could have it, and all of a sudden you've got a massive issue on your hands, and then all of a sudden the Premier League has to potentially stop and games have to be abandoned, and we're talking about issues with the economy, and everything comes back around, and it just all comes full circle, and the issues they go on and on and on. So luckily I'm not being paid to make these decisions, but it's quite clear the amount of positive COVID tests that we're getting in the Premier League alone.
Let me put it into perspective for people watching and thinking that we might be being harsh. I'm going to play 3-4-3 as an England manager. I'm going to go Walker, Maguire and Chilwell at the back, with Sancho, Grealish, Mount and Callum Hudson-Odoi in the midfield, with Foden, Abraham and Greenwood up top. And I've just named 3-4-3 of a squad that's breached lockdown restrictions in the last 6 months, which is ridiculous. It is absolutely terrible. That is, and it's being allowed to happen.
People look up to those guys as well, man. You remember that there's a lot of people that are supposed to look up to those, and if that's what they're doing, then there's no hope.
Do you know? I always say it, lads, and do you know what? I give footballers a lot of slack. And I say, look, I know a lot of them don't ask to be a role model, right? But these are really trying times, and you need to fucking fix up a little bit. Now, player irresponsibility is going to be the spanner that absolutely sabotages this season, because you've got a lot of teams now that are going into this season with no preseason. You've got a lot of teams where their players are already kind of still worn out from the last season. And this fixture list is going to pile up and pile up. And if you get a few positive COVID tests, that could bring the whole house of cards down. Because you could be going for a title, you could be trying to avoid relegation, and if you haven't got a bunch of lads in there that are responsible, they are going to throw a spanner in the works. And like Reece said as well, just from a moral standpoint, right, you're working around physiotherapists, nutritionists, sports science guys, kit guys, tea ladies, admin people, general staff, why would you chance giving it to them? I know they all have to do a bit there as well, but they're not on 200 grand a week. And I just think it is wildly irresponsible. And I'm not even the guy that puts footballers on a pedestal. I'm the guy that always cuts them some slack. But I just think to myself, what are you doing? And to add to that, lads, I was going to throw out a little suggestion to you, which I think would be interesting. How well it would work, given some of these clubs are run shambolically, I do not know. But would domestic bubbles help? I know certain clubs will have to go to Europe, for example, for away fixtures in the Champions League and the Europa League. But if you set up domestic bubbles all across the UK, where you could have maybe 3 teams in each bubble, and then they travel from bubble to play each week, could that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the answer is simple to that question. Yeah, it's the most logical scenario. The problem we have in this country, and this across multiple social issues, and it is not just sport, is that we are so incredibly averse to change. And everything that happens, people get up about it and they assume that people are trying to infringe on their social rights. And actually, it's just about keeping people safe. And if you look abroad, we have seen almost no unrest that I can think of about wearing a mask or having to stay inside, lockdown restrictions, things like that. People in Europe have just kind of accepted it and they embraced it, and they were able then to come back stronger from it. And yes, okay, they're seeing peak, but people are going back down to where they were. Like, look at New Zealand, they said straight away, okay, this is the way things are. People just accept it. I don't know what it is about Western culture, but we just will not embrace it. We will not accept it. People will line the streets, and the footballers will put down tools, and they will say, "No, I want to see my family." And that's a fair objection. But sometimes you just have to admit that there are people in this world who work on oil rigs for 6 months without seeing their family, and they accept that they do that because they're getting paid a fortune to do it. Footballers are getting paid a fortune, and if they are told, "Look, either you can take unpaid leave and go and see your families, but not play any football, and you are not a Chelsea player or a Liverpool player until you come back and you accept this bubble happens, or you come in this bubble, you get paid your 200 grand a week, and you shut up." That, for me, it wouldn't happen, but it's a logical explanation.
Yeah, it's a hard line, Reece, I agree with you, that needs to be taken. It was just something I read, lads, earlier on, and I was amazed that there was no positive COVID test since July, and that's because everybody bought into it. Everybody wanted to make the season happen. And the NBA, and bear in mind, America's a wild place as well. Like, we I don't know, Reece, if you saw it. I know me and Becky talked about the No Jumper podcast the other day, where we were talking about a girl that, shall we say, had an interaction with an entire basketball team. Do you know what I mean? These are not guys who are shy. They're not shy guys. Like, they live a very good life, and they live a wild life. But even they bought into it and said, "Look, we kind of got to get this done." And I just think, someone somewhere needs to adopt a hard line, lads. That's my final.
There's only 5 in a basketball team, so that's okay.
There may have been a couple of coaches involved as well. It was semantics, Reece, semantics.
Not as bad as it sounds.
It was as bad as it sounds. Yeah, it was apparently a wild night. But look, if you want to watch that, it ain't on this podcast yet, so go watch it somewhere else. But yeah, anything else you want to add to that, lads, before we move on?
I think we're
no.
Go on that one.
Yeah, sound okay, cool. All right, last weekend's results. Now, we talked obviously about player welfare and more positive COVID tests again. Fatigue is still setting in from last season. There's no pre-season. Were they a fluke, or are we going to see more results like this? Because Liverpool got battered at a side. I thought Manchester United got battered, right? And believe me, United got battered. But Liverpool, that was just so unexpected. Like, I even came on, right, and I said, I fully expect Spurs to run riot and score goals. You can go back and watch the podcast. It's all there. It's all evidence. Liverpool did not expect that. So are they freak results, lads, or are you kind of just expecting to see more of that?
Well, if you'd asked me when Leicester beat City 5-2, I'd maybe have said to you that it is a freak result. And we're getting to this stage now, and I'll sort of go down another route with this in FPL when we come to that. But perhaps it isn't a freak result. Perhaps they're not. Maybe we won't see 6s, 7s, and 8s, right? Perhaps the actual sheer volume of the goals that were scored might be a bit of a freak weekend. But if I said to you, Reece, because you didn't say, for example, you didn't watch the Liverpool-Villa game, or what was Liverpool-Villa score? I said, Villa battered Liverpool. You think, 3-1 then, maybe 3-1, 4-1. And we're talking, was it 7-2? The final score was. So there's a lot of circumstances this season that we've never seen before, and how many times every year they were unprecedented that's used. I joked to Spooner before the pod, please give me some precedented times back, because I'm bored of hearing that term. But you talk about the empty stadiums, talk about the COVID, players testing positive for COVID, there's no atmosphere. The Premier League this season without fans, and the fact that there's been pretty much no turnaround between last season and this season, it's a completely different ball game. And you're looking at some of these shock results, the 5-2, 6-1, 7-2. I don't think this is the end of it. I think we're going to be seeing more of this again. Will it be 7-2? Maybe not, but I think that we're going to be seeing the big sides getting turned over more often than what we'd like. Or if you're a fan of the smaller sides, then not as often as you'd like. But I don't think that this is an isolated weekend. I think we're going to be seeing more of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you've asked essentially two questions there. Why has it happened? And will we continue to see it? And I think the most obvious cause that you could probably say, like you said, James, it would point to the fact that there is no fans. For me, that would more push towards away results than the sheer amount of goals. There surely should be no impact in the amount of goals a team should score or concede. I mean, whether there is or not, I'm not sure. But look, let me flip the argument on its head. What if it's not to do with the fans? What if the fans only play a minor role? Let me go through each Premier League defence. Okay, Liverpool, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Joe Gomez can't defend. Okay, Liverpool fans might come for me, right, but they can't. Alexander-Arnold is brilliant going forward. Joe Gomez, whilst maybe a good defender in his day, he's actually made Virgil van Dijk look human this season. It's been that bad. They've struggled, and especially without Fabinho in the start of the season, they've struggled, right? But everyone puts Liverpool on a pedestal as the best Premier League defence. Go through each Premier League team. Chelsea, they've been poor defensively. Leicester, poor defensively. Manchester United, awful. There is no team in the Premier League, in my view, that you could hand on heart sit there and go, do you know what, that's a really good back four or really solid back five. You couldn't do it, right? And again, found out. Teams, or the smaller teams, and also and the bigger teams as well, have attacking coaches that are going, do you know what, just go at them, be direct, and it's working. And it's no surprise that we're having goal fests, which of course we love. The second question, of course, you asked was, will we continue to see it? Well, in the short term, I think, yeah, definitely, of course, because teams are starting to figure out now, if we just are really direct at teams, then, we can score goals. The flip side of that is the teams that are on the receiving end of that directness can then go and counter, and then we end up with this end-to-end kind of football, which everyone loves to see. Of course, it's making betting on football incredibly difficult. But is it going to continue? In the short term, like I said, yes. But there are defensive coaches out there who are being paid a lot of money to analyse games and implement new defensive styles. And every few years, we see a different style of football dominate. I think when Spain won the World Cup and the Euros, that was faultless. It couldn't be beaten. Fast forward 2 years, people had figured it out, and it was just boring and it wasn't effective. And there would always be cycles in football, and this is such a crisis for the big teams, and they have such a pool of money and the access to coaches that they've got. I wouldn't expect it to continue past Christmas time.
Interesting you say that, because I'm going to throw a spanner in the works and say I think it will. I think with the turnaround time between the two seasons, I think COVID isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. In fact, over Christmas, between November and maybe the sort of start of March, it's really going to peak. You're going to see loads of positive COVID tests. You're going to see key players missing everywhere. You're going to see fatigue setting in very, very early. You've got a lot of players then who have maybe one eye on the Euros as well, and they'll know that their kind of place is cemented. There's a few people there. I don't want to question their professionalism, but I think to myself, if you haven't really got anything to play for, you're going to take your foot off the gas a little bit. Are you going to come around March time, maybe go, you know what? Yeah, let me save myself a little bit here for the start of June, because I've been playing for the past 12 months straight. Let me ease off the pedal a little bit. Let me just take 5. I not run that extra yard, not make that extra sprint. And I think a lot of players, as we said, they're selfish individuals. A lot of players will think about themselves. And I think this is going to be the most bizarre Premier League season yet. I think you may even see a winner of the Premier League that you have not anticipated since Leicester, because I cannot see any team getting a run of form together for more than 5 or 6 games. I can't.
I see what you're saying, but even if we took players' ambition aside and said, look, everyone wants to win the Premier League, everyone wants to win games. You're not in sport if you're not a competitive person. If you take that aside, then players still have big win bonuses, big goal bonuses, clean sheet bonuses, and they're going to want to attain those. So I think the idea of them just saying, I can't be bothered this season is a little reductionist. It's a little out there. Possible, of course.
Cynical, maybe, yeah.
Cynical as well, but I mean, it's a possible explanation. But for me, I would struggle to see how a person who has had this competitiveness instilled into them since 4 or 5 years old when they first kicked the ball, just to say, there's a pandemic, I don't really need to win anymore. I don't see that.
Where I think Spooner's got a point, and I kind of agree with him a little bit, is that I don't think there's no coincidence that we're seeing such a shake-up so far this season already with everything that's going on, with all factors at play. And I'm not saying like you sort of mentioned, Reece, that the reason why this is happening is because there's no fans. I don't think that's directly the reason for why teams are shipping in goals, but the situation as a whole, with everything that's going on, like you say, Spooner, the fixture pile-up, how many positive COVID tests, how many players are going to be missing, the turnaround. When you put all that together, I just don't think that it's a coincidence that it's resulted in the games that we're seeing and the competitiveness of it. And again, Spooner mentioned, we're kind of anticipating the issues with COVID to be going on, at least into early next year, maybe even longer. And how many months of the season are we talking about that's been affected by COVID then? So if the same issues that we're having with COVID now are continuing into the next year, then I see no reason why the situation as it is can't continue. Would that mean that we're going to see a Premier League winner that we haven't seen before, like a Leicester? I don't know if I'd quite make that leap. Is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible. Leicester showed that. I still think you'll see a Liverpool or a City or someone, maybe even like an Arsenal, Chelsea, one of those will win it, I believe. But you're looking at clubs like Everton and Villa at the moment, it wouldn't shock me to see clubs that we didn't anticipate being in that top 4.
Yeah, I agree. Do you know what I will say about Premier League footballers? I've seen plenty of them down tools. Plenty of them. And they're not scared to get a man sacked. If they don't like you, oh no, there's no friends in this business. They're like, sorry, mate, you got to go. I don't like working under you anymore. I'm not going to run that extra yard. I'm not going to make that tackle. And Reece, keep that glass half full. I like that positive attitude, but just be aware, some of these lads, they underneath it all, right? They only care about themselves. No, that's a harsh reality.
I think in isolated incidents, of course, you're right. I mean, the PFA is a wonderful organisation. It does so much for player welfare, but it also provides a place for players to hide when they do want to down tools, like you say. But for me, I mean, for that to happen on such a large scale, we've for us to say that there are 2 or 3 players out of 11 in pretty much every defence in the Premier League doing it, I don't know.
We'll see. Time will reveal all. All right, FPL, right. We talked about coronavirus sabotaging the league, the world, day-to-day life. Yes, it has gone and sabotaged FPL too, because God knows how you're supposed to win this league this year with everything that's going on. It's going to take a very lucky, maybe slightly skillful man. Right, Becky, elaborate for us. FPL, we're going in a bit of depth this week, so where are we starting?
Yeah, I think it's only fair that we delve in a little bit deeper this week, because I don't want to say we've glossed over it the last few weeks, but we've sort of assumed that the FPL game weeks as we know them. Like I mentioned, I think it might have been last week, I was telling people, I was urging people, don't panic. I was saying things are going to get back to normal. The big clubs are going to get back to normal. The big scorers from seasons gone by are going to start scoring. Everything's going to be fine. Don't rush for your wild card. All of these things that I was saying, because normally, and I think Reece would agree, those things do tend to happen. And as we've just mentioned on the previous topic, they aren't happening at the moment. And there's a general concern that I haven't seen amongst the FPL community and just general football fans that things might not follow the norm of how they usually do, and the patterns that we've seen in previous seasons might not be the case for this year. So we've discussed the crazy week that's just happened and the results that shocked us all. But I wanted to put sort of a question to you guys now, and the question is, how seriously should we start to take the likes of Everton, Villa and Leeds, and to what extent should we really be looking at some of their players perhaps being mainstays in our sides? Now, I'll come on to their next sort of 6 games in a moment, because I've looked at there's an element of Fantasy League called the fixture difficulty rating, where you can look at pretty much all their games for months ahead, and it sort of highlights them in green if it's an easier fixture, and a red if it's a difficult fixture, which doesn't really help us at the moment, because who knows what is an easy fixture and what's a difficult fixture. But before I sort of go into the games, the question is, how seriously do we need to start taking Everton players, Villa players, Leeds players, for example?
I'll let you hit in with them.
One thing that is never wrong, I mean, obviously, like you said, it's an unpredictable season in terms of what clubs are doing what. Okay, but if you take the season where Leicester won the Premier League, that was in perfectly normal circumstances. There was nothing, there was no hardship or anything like to throw a spanner in the works. But when people figured out that Vardy was on top form, they were putting Vardy in their team. When they figured out Mahrez was scoring points, they put Mahrez in their team. So when it comes to this season, you see Everton initially flying high, then there's no reason not to go with the form. You know, if there are teams that are scoring lots of goals and there's a player that's heavily involved in their goals, then it would make sense, regardless of what that team is, whether it's West Brom, whether it be Liverpool, to put those players in your team. So you have to follow the form. Always follow the form.
Let me sort of so I'll break down some of the fixtures as well. If you're looking at Everton, so if you're someone who hasn't got any Everton players, or maybe you've just got one, maybe you're trying to find a way to get others into your team, you're looking at the next 6 fixtures, right? They've got a very interesting game after the international break, Merseyside derby, which is probably the most excited I've been for Merseyside derby for some time, and I hope it doesn't disappoint, because for the first time in a while, we really don't know how that's going to go. After that, they've got Southampton, then Newcastle, then Manchester United, then Fulham, then Leeds. It's not the easiest sort of run in. And then you look at Villa, fresh off that big victory. They've got Leicester, then Leeds, Southampton, Arsenal, Brighton, and West Ham. It's a bit of a mixed bag there. So there's a few sort of you can make a case, should I say, for putting some of those players in. And if it's Villa, perhaps you might have a look at Grealish. He's only 7.1 million. Ollie Watkins, he had a hat-trick the previous week, 5.9 million. Or perhaps a John McGinn at 5.5. Looking at Everton, they're also relatively cheap. You've got Calvert-Lewin, who can't seem to stop scoring at the moment, 7.6. You've got James Rodriguez, 7.8. And then Richarlison, 7.9. So I think the first game week or two, when they started firing and scoring points, a lot of FPL managers are going, yeah, but don't worry about those. I know they're cheap, but they'll peter out. But they generally now, those rates, I know they've had slight price hikes and ever so slightly 0.1 here and there, but they're looking like very tempting sort of players to choose now. You're looking at James Rodriguez at 7.8 million. You're comparing him to your Bruno Fernandes's, your Kevin De Bruyne's, your Salah's and Mane's. You're saving £4 to £5 million there on some of those. So I think what I'm saying is it would be within your best interests to start looking at these players if you haven't got them already, because there's other people around you who are raking in endless points for the likes of Ollie Watkins, Grealish, Rodriguez, etc. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're right. But if we use the Leicester analogy again, I remember as a Newcastle fan sitting in St James's Park, I had a season ticket up there for a few years, and I knew that Leicester were doing well and things, but I hadn't watched many of their performances, especially under the microscope, until obviously they came to St James's Park, and they won the game with 3-0 that day. And not only did they win 3-0, but it was the most impressive performance I've ever seen live out of any club ever. So when you see things like that, you start to realize actually these players are churning in these points because yes, they have good ability and they're playing well, but realistically it's because the system they're playing in is good and the style of play they're playing is working and they're consistent in doing so. When you look at a Villa, they've had a good start to the season, but do we see that continuing? For example, we've had a couple of clean sheets. Do we see that defence as a sturdy defence that's going to keep clean sheets all season and rake in the points? No, we don't. Do we see their attacking line as one that's going to go ahead and challenge Mane, Salah and Firmino for their goals tally? No, we don't. When you look at Everton, on the other hand, and again, not to disrespect Aston Villa, but when you look at Everton, yes, Calvert-Lewin's getting the goals. Yes, he's playing well. He's not playing out of his skin. He's been good. He's got the goals, which is what he's meant to do. And yes, James Rodriguez has been fantastic. But Carlo Ancelotti's system is allowing them to play in that way. Mm. And that is how you can start to see a pattern form. You can start to predict that any future games that they play, whether against Liverpool, Brighton, or a team very near the bottom, like a Fulham, West Brom, they're going to play in that way. And that's going to allow the strikers to get goals. And it's a good predictor of points.
Yeah. And Reece kind of mentioned there, and this brings me on to one of my other sort of suggestions or tips, if you like. You mentioned about Villa's defence. Do we see the likes of Villa, maybe Leeds, their defence holding out, or they start leaking goals? Perhaps not. But what I will say is, if you in FPL at the moment, I would suggest you look at a 3 at the back formation for defence, 3-4-3, maybe a 3-5-2, because you're getting nothing for defenders at the moment, really, unless you're going for full-backs. If you're looking to do a wild card or redo your team, or you're playing the 3 at the back, my advice would be look at full-backs that are going to get you assists, because they're probably not going to get you clean sheets. You're looking at full-backs that may be on set piece, like your Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Yeah.
You know, players like Lamptey at the moment is playing very well. He's getting assists. Trent and Robertson still getting assists. You look at the sign of Alex Telles. If he's contributing in any way to what he was in Portugal in games, then he'll be one that's going to get forward a lot. If you're looking at defenders at the moment, I wouldn't be looking much into centre-halves. I'd cast away most of the centre-halves you got if possible, because unless they get you a goal, which is quite rare, then they're probably going to concede. So I'm probably going to go for a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2 formation for this week. Before I get on to sort of captain pick, Spooner, was like anything that you wanted to bring up on FPL or resending you wanted to bring up?
The one guy that I feel like has been a very big letdown thus far was Aubameyang. Ever since he signed that Arsenal contract, he's gone off the boil a little bit, and he is a luxury player. He is a lot of money in FPL, a lot of money. And you said, Becky, very well put. Somebody like a James Rodriguez, who is now comfortable in the side. Reece said, they develop patterns of play. They're starting to know him and his game. That's only going to improve as time goes on. So I think James Rodriguez is an excellent shout. I said to you, Becky, before we came on, I fancy Calvert-Lewin to bag. I said last week Harry Kane would terrorise Manchester United because they're all at sea. That Manchester United team coming back from an international break, I fully expect Callum Wilson to run wild. If you are looking for a pick this week, I would say Callum Wilson. That's what I'm going to say. Reece is shaking his head. I'm going Callum Wilson.
Absolute no for me. Bruce, on a separate point, talking about Newcastle, Bruce Ball is not good, okay? And Saint-Maximin is being rushed back every time, which means that he can't stay fit. First of all, against Manchester United, Newcastle under Bruce will sit back. They won't try and play, okay? I have said this before, I'll say it again. Callum Wilson has scored in his first 4 games, but if he can get 7 goals for the all season, so 3 more goals in the rest of the season, for me, that's more than could have been predicted at the start of the season based on how Newcastle play. Now, is he a good enough player to take 20 chances out of 20 that he's given? Yeah, of course he is. He's a good striker, but Newcastle as a team will not create those chances for him. Put that player in the Everton team that's playing the way that they're playing, of course, put him in there right then. But it's like I said before, just because he started the season strongly, he's playing for a team that aren't playing well. Despite getting results, getting goals, they're not playing well, and they won't create him chances.
Yeah. The problem that you have with not betting against United, but sort of predicting that results will go against United is that for as bad as they are at times and as bad as they can be, they're never far away from surprising you, United. And it sort of irritates me to say that, but coming off such a big defeat last week, they've made a couple of signings. All right, Cavani isn't available. Tellers probably will be. I don't think they would let something like that happen again. Is it possible? Of course it is. The defence, is pretty awful. It's horrid, but I can't envisage another result like that happening to United, like a Wilson, Maxima going riot and then putting 4, 5, 6 passes. I just don't see that. I think I can see United sort of getting a result against Newcastle, maybe on a slight upturn, and then it will all fall apart again. But again, you said it last week, Spoon, you mentioned about Kane going wild. Would it shock me? Probably not. Nothing's really going to shock me anymore after what we saw last week. But in terms of captains, there are a few options here. And you mentioned Aubameyang, luxury player, doesn't seem to be doing much at the moment. Salah was a good one last week. Reece obviously made a good choice there. You had him, even though they lost 7-2. What did he get you, Reece? 20-odd points, 30-odd points?
Yeah, he got the 2 goals.
When I picked, I think it was Jimenez. Obviously, you did well with Kane. So it is kind of a mixed bag. But you have to look at perhaps Bruno Fernandes. Reece likes to call him Fernandes, as do many others, because if they get a penalty, which the odds are quite stacked in that favour, then he will take them and probably score them. And if United just so happen to hit any sort of decent pattern of play or play well, then he's usually a focal point of those. So he is one to consider if you're anticipating they might play well. And then you're looking at the usual suspects for you. You said Kane, Son, those two, they can't seem to miss between them. Assists, goals galore. I'm sure I read that is Christian Pulisic back this week?
He is, yeah.
For Chelsea. So I'd be interested to see if he was to sort of get a start or whether he was to come on. And it wouldn't surprise me if he was to sort of, from where he left off last time, start back there and start getting in amongst the goals again, because they're not really coming from Havertz or Werner. So he might be one to consider if you're looking to go a little bit different to the rest. And then the last one, which is the most left field of them all, and I know Reece probably won't agree with this one, but they are home to Fulham, which is Sheffield United. If you're lucky enough to have had a Ryan Brewster in your team for £4.5 million, which I was, I kind of put him in there with the view that he might get picked up by a club and play every week, but if not, then he'll just stay on my bench, and he was only 4.5 million. But he's been told, Chris Wilder has said he will start, and he is likely to play every week, and they are playing Fulham at home, and Fulham are dreadful, as we know. So if he gets an early goal or he gets up to a good start, then who's to say he couldn't get a good return this week? Will it last? Maybe not. But if you're sort of chasing, is what I would say, and you're looking to try and make moves where other people aren't, then someone like a Pulisic or a Brewster might be someone that you want to have a look at. Reece,
well, look, I think my captain this week, I mean, it is a huge conflict, isn't it? Because Salah's been in such good form and you'd back him to score against anyone. And then you've got Jimenez against Leeds, who look like it could be 4-4 every game. And Jimenez is Wolves' main goal outlet. And then you follow the form and you say that Calvert-Lewin could score against anyone at the moment. I think I'd have to go for Jimenez, but Calvert-Lewin's a good shout as well. On the subject of Brewster, I think as far as Sheffield United are concerned, this is a relegation 6-pointer, and Fulham will consider the same thing. So I think we could be likely to see a tighter game than might have been imagined. And also, we're not necessarily going to see Brewster start. He could start, and
he's going to start.
But I mean, what part in the game will he play? Will he play 90 minutes? We know that Pulisic won't, for example. So it is, I would say, like you said, left field, and I would avoid it.
Yeah, well, lads, I'm going to go with Harry Kane again. I think if he comes through the international fixtures this week relatively unscathed, um, he's gonna have another big weekend. I think he will. I'm going Kane again. If you are looking for a captain, no, Son isn't a bad idea, but I would go Kane. Yeah, Kane. Jimenez is another letdown, Becky. I've been very surprised with him, to be honest with you. He's kind of like doing in fits and starts. He still hasn't really found a rhythm yet. And I've had him as vice captain a few times. And I'm at the stage now where I'm thinking, Jimenez or Calvert-Lewin. I have a decision to make there because Calvert-Lewin is on red hot fire right
What I would say to that as well, you make a good point, and you say about Calvert-Lewin, a lot of people will be looking at the fixtures and going, but they've got Liverpool. And that's potentially a mistake they'll make, because how many weeks have we been looking at the likes of Aubameyang, the likes of Mane, Bruno Fernandes, Kevin De Bruyne, and going, this will be the week now. This will be the week that they get all these points. They're playing so-and-so this week. This will be the week. And every week so far, we keep looking at the results, and Calvert-Lewin's bagging again. James Rodriguez, is bagging again. And a lot depends with me, because I'm going to wait until about Friday to see what the Kevin De Bruyne situation is. Because obviously he had a bit of a knock on the international break, and he does tend to play very well against Arsenal, gets good points return. I mean, he's currently in my team, so I'm going to try and get an update from him, because if he isn't playing, then I might look to take him out for perhaps a Salah or a Bruno Fernandes and go for one of them too. But if you're going to be one of those people that's going to overlook Calvert-Lewin again, then do so at your peril, because it wouldn't surprise me. But they could lose 3-2, right? That's possible, and he could get both of them. So you don't need so much focus too much on the results sometimes, just will they get the goals? And you'd have to argue at the moment that there's a very real possibility that Calvert-Lewin could get a goal. So he's one that I think will still be popular.
Yeah, it's an interesting week, all right. It's a very tough week of fixtures, because me and Becky were speaking about this before we came on. There's a lot of ifs, buts, and maybes, because there's a lot of games that could go either way this week, and you just don't know who's going to do what. So, with FPL, lads, do you have anything else you want to add to it before we round up? No, we all good? All right, we finito again, people. So big shout out to all the subscribers that have been getting in touch with us. I know loads of people are subscribed. They can comments, they can Instagram DMs, send us questions. We love it. Thank you. Even the bad comments, we appreciate you too. It doesn't go unnoticed. We got love for you as well. So make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, follow us up on the social media platforms. And yeah, you know what we do. Same time next week. We'll be back, people. Take care. Ciao.